The sun beating down on the Sepang International Circuit usually carries the scent of spent fuel and melting rubber. But on the final day of the 2026 Shakedown, it carried something far more volatile, the scent of a revolution. For 3 years, the Iwata factory had been the walking wounded of the Paddock, clinging to an inline-4 engine philosophy that was effectively a relic in a world dominated by V4 monsters. But as the clock ticked toward the afternoon session, the timing screens flickered, and a collective chill ran through the rival garages of Ducati and KTM. Toprak Razgatlioglu, the man many said was too wild for the precision of a prototype, had just done the unthinkable. The Turkish star didn't just break the shakedown record, he shattered it. But it wasn't the lap time that froze the engineers in their tracks, it was the telemetry. According to insiders, the data coming off Toprak's bike defied the laws of MotoGP physics. He was braking deeper, leaning further, and punishing the front Michelin in a way no simulation had ever predicted. Yet, as the cheers erupted on one side of the Yamaha garage, a heavy, suffocating tension began to bleed over to the other. The fastest lap in Yamaha's history hadn't been set on their future, it had been set on their past. And in that moment, the Paddock realized that Yamaha's path back to the top wasn't a straight line, it was a civil war. To understand the weight of this moment, you have to understand what Yamaha sacrificed to get here. For decades, the YZR M1 was the ballerina of MotoGP, smooth, agile, and powered by the iconic inline-4 engine. It was the heart of Valentino Rossi's legend and Jorge Lorenzo's precision. But by 2025, that heart was failing. The bike was being bullied on the straights, left breathless by the sheer horsepower of the European V4s. The decision was radical, expensive, and arguably desperate. Yamaha would kill the inline-4. They poured millions into a brand new V4 project, a machine designed to be a Ducati killer. This was the new V4, the bike Fabio Quartararo had been demanding for years. It was ferocious, loud, and visually explosive. On the long Sepang straights, it finally gave Yamaha the top speed they had craved, matching the fastest bikes in the world at over 335 km/h. But power is a double-edged sword. While the new engine brought speed, it also brought chaos. The new V4 was a beast that refused to be tamed, leaving the 2021 world champion searching for a feel that seemed to have vanished into the exhaust fumes. While Fabio wrestled with the future, Toprak Razgatlioglu was conducting a masterclass on the alternative. Yamaha had arrived at Sepang with two distinct philosophies. One side of the garage held the raw, unrefined potential of the latest V4 evolution. The other held a more mature, conservative version of the engine, essentially the final iteration of the development cycle. The Paddock expected Toprak to spend his first days simply learning how to survive on a prototype. Instead, he treated the Yamaha like a weapon. His riding style was a staggering departure from the MotoGP norm. He brought his signature Superbike aggression, braking so hard the rear tire hovered inches off the asphalt, a technique traditionally considered too risky for the delicate balance of a GP bike. But the old V4 package loved it. The bike remained stable under his brutal inputs, and the corner exit traction became his primary weapon. Some mechanics claimed something felt off about the physics they were seeing. They had never seen a rider force a Yamaha to turn with such violence while maintaining such a solid rhythm. Toprak wasn't just fast. He was repeating those record laps with a consistency that suggested he had found a sweet spot the engineers hadn't even designed. On the other side of the blue wall, the atmosphere was a stark contrast of clinical frustration. Fabio Quartararo, the man who had carried Yamaha on his back through their darkest seasons, was the designated canary in the coal mine. He was tasked with the development of the new V4, the engine touted as the manufacturer's true future. Visually, Fabio's bike was a marvel. It looked more explosive on the approach to turns 1 and 15, screaming past the grandstands with a fierce new engine note. But inside the helmet, the struggle was real. Fabio was seen in constant heated discussions with his technical crew, gesturing wildly about the bike's behavior. The new engine's acceleration was ferocious, yes, but it came at a staggering cost. The front-end feel, historically Yamaha's greatest strength, was missing. Fabio was forced to make several small, frantic corrections mid-corner, indicating that the chassis and engine were not yet speaking the same language. Rumors suggested deeper tension behind closed doors. While the world saw a faster Yamaha, Fabio saw a bike that was slowly losing its soul in exchange for horsepower. He was fast, but he was fighting for every millisecond, while Toprak on the older tech seemed to be dancing. By the afternoon of day 3, Yamaha found itself at a crossroads that could define the next 5 years of their racing history. The data was undeniable. The old V4 was stable, consistent, and in the hands of a predator like Toprak, staggeringly fast. The new V4 was a rocket ship, but it was raw, unpredictable, and punishing on its rider. This wasn't just a technical debate. It was a high-stakes gamble with the career of a world champion. If Yamaha chose the conservative path, they risked being outdeveloped by mid-season as Ducati and KTM continued their relentless aero and engine wars. If they chose the radical new V4, they risked a season-long collapse of results while they tried to find a setup that wouldn't crash the bike. The pressure within the garage was mounting. Every time Fabio returned to the pits early to provide feedback on throttle response and chassis balance, the weight on the engineers' shoulders grew. They had two different weapons, two extreme riding styles, and a ticking clock. Indirectly, Yamaha was simulating a choice they didn't want to make. Do you go with the bike that works now or the bike that might win later? As the sun began to set over the Sepang palms, the Paddock whispers reached a fever pitch. Rival teams weren't just monitoring the lap times, they were obsessively analyzing the body language of the Yamaha crew. Some observers noted that the old V4 looked reaching maturity, a finished product that could challenge for podiums tomorrow. But there was a darker narrative forming. Reports suggested that some engineers were pushing for a hybrid approach, a desperate attempt to marry the stability of the old package with the raw power of the new one. But in the world of 350 km/h prototypes, hybrid often means compromised. Insiders claimed that the tension between the Japanese engineers who favored the conservative approach and the European technical directors who demanded more risk was reaching a breaking point. Yamaha was no longer just fighting their rivals, they were fighting their own internal identity. They had the speed to be a threat, but they lacked a unified direction. And in MotoGP, hesitation is as good as a mechanical failure. When the checkered flag finally flew on the 2026 Sepang Shakedown, the overall picture was both terrifying and inspiring. Yamaha was no longer the polite manufacturer from the back of the grid. They had transformed into a predator with two distinct faces. Toprak Razgatlioglu had proven that he wasn't just another Superbike crossover. He was a revolution in human form. He had taken an inferior engine and used it to break a record that shouldn't have been possible. Fabio Quartararo had shown the world that he was ready to push the limits of technology, even if it meant risking a severe setback in his quest for a second title. The third day of testing wasn't just the end of a session, it was the beginning of a far more dangerous story. Yamaha now stands in the middle of a crazy battle, armed with the data to potentially end Ducati's dominance. They are flexible, they are adaptive, and for the first time in years they are truly dangerous. But as the teams pack their crates for the first round, the question that haunts the paddock remains unanswered. Yamaha has found the power, but can they find the peace? One thing is certain, the V4 Crossroads has changed the championship narrative entirely, and what happens next will leave even the most seasoned insiders stunned.